And speaking of standing on business, Jordan Montgomery said, "Hey, Scott Boras, freaking take a hike, pal. Good for you, man.
Start the trend.
Good for you." All right. So if you're unaware, Jordan Montgomery, who, as you know, signed very late, signed a 1-year, $25 million deal with the D-backs back at the end of March. He decided to, I'm just going to say it, fire Scott Boras. I originally had that in my notes, and I'm like, wait a minute, is that the language I should be using? And in the official report on ESPN, it said fired Scott Boras. So I said, you know what? If they say it, I'm gonna go with fired. I'm not gonna go parted ways. I'm not gonna go mutually agreed to find another option. No, Jordan Montgomery said, thanks, but no thanks. You're washed.
It's excellent. It really is excellent. I love it. I'm excited. I hope this starts a trend.
I saw a tweet, and forgive me, I don't recall who said it, but it was just a banger of a tweet that said, it was something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember it verbatim, but it was like, my mom asked me if I did the dishes, and I just said Scott Boras. She looked at me and smiled. She knew they were washed. I'm like, that's where we're headed, man. That is the stage in the game at which we are at. Scott Boras is starting to lose his. He was one of the Boras 4. Montgomery was this offseason.
Yeah.
So starting to chip away at that, and I would venture to say that, like you said, I think a trend is about to unfold here, because look, you're messing with these guys' lives. And I understand that you're trying to get the most money, and that if you're able to do that, then you're helping them out, but you run the risk of jamming these guys up. And I mean, I'll touch on it here towards the end, but look at a guy like Blake Snell. You assume he's going to be fine, even though he's starting late, has not looked good thus far through, I think it's 2 starts. So
yeah,
I think his clients are going to start looking at around the league and going, it's not worth it, man. I'd rather go in. I'd rather get a competitive offer and even make a compromise if I have to. But I'd like to keep my image intact, and I would like to keep my off-season and in-season rhythms intact by making sure that I'm, starting the season on time with the rest of the league. So I don't know, man. I'm just really out on Scott Boras. I really am. And apparently so is Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah. I think there's, like, as these salaries start climbing, and there's got to be players that look at it different ways of like what the money does and what the money represents. And like, obviously being at the top of your game in your field, like it is a representation of what you've done and what you're going to do when you get that big contract, when you're in a league leading AAV status or length of contract status. But you're starting to see guys that, I don't know, that maybe there is this flip of a switch of like, well, maybe money isn't everything. Number one. Number two, like, maybe other factors have to start coming into play, right? Ohtani with this crazy deal with everything deferred. You talk about how like Bryce Harper is like fallen in love with the city of Philly. No opt-outs in a 13-year deal or whatever it is. There's other factors into this, and it just seems to me like Scott Boras is so about maximizing dollar amount. And there's like this manipulation of his clients saying, well, you deserve more, so I'm going to find you more. And maybe Jordan Montgomery starts this snowball effect of like these other players that maybe will feel similarly and say, you know what, like maybe team success, maybe location for my family, stability, consistency are bigger factors than whatever this dollar amount is that Boras is seeking. And I can't help but want to give Jordan Montgomery a big pat on the back for this decision, where it's for sure against the trend. And of the 4 names, I mean, you could argue that, like, I don't know, I feel like Cody Bellinger would be the bigger pissed off one of the crew. You know what I mean? As far as upside and what he's done in the past, and arguably the most talent of that group, I would say that's probably one of the bigger disappointments. So I don't know, man. I'd like to see a couple more names come out and say I'm moving on. And I'd like to see other agents come into play. And I'm sure GMs would love to see other names come into play, saying, hey, I want to deal with people that are humans, not just, money-driven vampires. That's pretty on point, isn't it? Scott Boras, money-driven vampire.
Well, that's the thing. Is the point you made about Scott Boras being a guy that identifies or perceives the value that his client has and said, you know what? You deserve more money. I'm going to go find you more money. Look, I don't know the guy, but I think it's safe to say that Scott Boras is not that altruistic in terms of his motives. Mm-hmm. The reality is he goes out, finds his client more money. He's getting a greater cut of that money.
Right.
So as idealistic as it would be to sit here and say, well, Scott Boras is, you can't hate on the guy because he's just looking out for his clients. He's trying to maximize their value. It's like, at the end of the day, his job, what pays him,
right,
and what increases his pay is increasing the value or the money, the dollar amount that he brings in for his clients. So
we talked about how it's like this super weird terms that he has too. You know what I mean? Like he's requested to be a part of every press conference with his players, and he has to be sitting up next to his, like, pushing the wife down a seat so he can sit closer to his client and be in the frame. It's weird, man. It's weird mentality. It's weird actions. I think it's pretty obvious that GMs are fed up with it. It's kind of cool to see that players are getting a little fed up with it. And maybe I'm just putting this out there. I would love to see Soto go in a different direction. Save some money this offseason for his contract.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is not an offseason that I think Juan Soto. I mean, maybe he's got the wool over his eyes. Maybe he doesn't realize it. But this is not an offseason that you want to freaking foul up if you're Juan Soto.
Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah, this cannot be a repeat thing. And I don't know if other players, if it's a domino effect and other players start bailing. Who knows what that means for potential clients that haven't hit their biggest free agency yet.
Not good for old Scotty B.